Okay.
And we might as well break right into it. So, how would you define free software? You're a free software advocate. That's what you're most known for, and a data privacy advocate. How would you?
No, that's not what I advocate. I'll tell you, I'll explain
Okay.
later. But first, I want to respond to the first point. Free software is software that respects the user's freedom. But there's a lot to say about what free software means. So rather than make me repeat it now, how about if you put on my TEDx talk, which in 14 minutes gives people a complete basic introduction?
Okay. We'll either edit that into this video, or we'll definitely put the link in the show notes.
No. Edit it into the video.
We'll edit it in.
People will think that they can skip it. They'll assume that free software is similar to open source, and they know what open source is.
Well, let's get into it.
So they'll be wrong.
Let's assume they watched the video. We'll put it in here. I may put it on the end just so it doesn't disrupt the flow of conversation.
No.
I'm not even allowed to decide where I put it. This is my video, Richard.
Well, we're doing this together, but I know what's needed. I know that a lot of these short...
You're quite demanding of others, I gotta say.
Yes, there are a few things I'm really demanding about, and you, of course, you can delete this conversation, but the point is, people who don't see that video will misunderstand all the rest of what I say, and if you put it at the end, they won't bother because they think it's not necessary.
We will make sure they see that video. So,
of course, I know that they can skip it if they want to go to that trouble, if they want to invite misunderstanding, but at least it won't be the default easiest path.
Why did you start the free software movement?
I wanted to have freedom in my computing, and I wanted other programmers to have freedom in their computing. I wasn't thinking back in 1983 about a world in which everyone used computers all the time. I knew, of course, there were hobbyists, but they too were doing something of an exploratory nature, something that most people didn't do. And so it was for that kind of user that I thought about this. And I knew that but unlike most of them, I had lived in a world of free software for something like 12 years. So I knew what free software was as a way of life. The way of life of using software that you had control over and that respected your freedom. And by that time, in 1983, most computer users did not have that experience. They only had the experience of non-free user subjugating software, which was controlled completely by its developer and enabled the developer to have power over the users. And when I looked at how they were living, I was disgusted by it.
You were disgusted by the fact that most people were okay with not using it?
No, I was disgusted by what I saw, their way of life. They weren't disgusted by it because they didn't know any other way. They didn't have a standard of comparison, but I did, and I realized what a bad thing was taking over computing.
But what really is the concern? So let's say I'm a guy, I'm using Facebook, I'm using Google, I'm using Zoom instead of Big Blue Button. Why the concern philosophically? What are you ultimately concerned about?
The original concern was that you're using software that you don't control. You don't decide what it does. Someone else decides what it's going to do to you, or supposedly for you. But it's doing both at once. It's doing something for you, and it's doing something to you at the same time, and you have no choice about either one. So if the thing it's doing for you is annoying because it's not exactly what you want, you can't change that. You don't have the source code. And of course, you may not know what it's doing to you unless people figure it out. But even if you happen to know, you can't change that either. So it's basically a pile of injustice, and I don't want any part of that. And
Go ahead.
of course, you're used to it. So you're used to obeying the, the boss's men in anything you do with a computer, and you hardly even notice. But I know what wrong is being done to you, and maybe I can show you.
Well, you're in the 0.0001% of people that are capable of functioning without the use of proprietary software, which is often very user friendly, accommodating to the user.
Actually, I don't think that's true. Free software, there's free software which is pretty user friendly also, especially for the jobs that a lot of people want to do. Things like LibreOffice, for instance, which is an office suite, and it's as user friendly as any other graphical interface office suite. The thing is, there's something more important. Basically, is the software developed to serve its users or to control them and cheat them, manipulate them, spy on them, and any other bad thing the developer wants to put into it? Nowadays, something has got worse. Back in 1983, most non-free programs were developed to do useful things for the user, and that was all. So the user couldn't control how they did it or what they did, but what they did was serve the user. In that respect, they were honest back then. But that's not true anymore. Nowadays, non-free software is normally malware, meaning it's designed to mistreat the user. And mistreats the user in all sorts of ways. Look at gnu.org/malware for lists. There are hundreds of examples of proprietary malware from the best known companies, because it's normal to treat the user with contempt. You know, those who have power over others get used to that. They start thinking of the others as there to be manipulated. Essentially, they're prey, they're victims, marks, and so they hardly even consult their consciences about that.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. That's why I'm a Monero advocate, and we'll get into that. But you saw this at a very early stage. You saw this in the 80s when people were, Google didn't exist yet, obviously. These big behemoth siren servers didn't exist yet that were collecting.
Well, there was nothing to do that with, right? There was no World Wide Web.
You foresaw that? You saw it coming?
No. I didn't foresee anything. I saw what was happening then, and that was so bad I wouldn't stand for it.
Did you think it would get to this point as the point that we're at?
No. I was first of all, the specific goal was to develop a free software operating system. And then since it needed to have a technical design, I said, let's imitate Unix. Let's make something that is basically a compatible replacement for Unix, plus whatever improvements I could think of. You know, Unix didn't have an Emacs, but I wanted an Emacs, so I made sure there was one. We could add things that Unix didn't have, but the facilities of Unix that a user would want had to be there for upward compatibility's sake. Now, I was pretty sure we would finish developing a free replacement for Unix. However, how far that would get, I had no idea. I'm a pessimist by nature, but there's no better way to assure defeat than to give up. So it's never useful to give up.
do you believe that free software should naturally be adopted by people and it should be able to compete with proprietary software? Or you believe that proprietary software needs to be regulated?
Neither.
So that free software.
Neither.
How do you?
Neither one, because I don't look at it in those terms.
In what terms do you look at it?
Non-free software is an injustice. I want to free people, but you can't force someone to be free. So I figure let's free the people who want freedom, and if the rest, well, you can lead a human to wisdom, but you can't make her think. So the people who don't care about freedom, to whom it's not important, we can't stop them from going on being more and more mistreated, more and more helplessly subjugated. It's sad to think about, but we can't do anything about that, at least not now.
So you just want them to have the choice. You're not saying that
I want them to be free, but I can't force them to be.
Right. So
I want everyone to have freedom, and of course not just in the software field, but the software field is where I have launched the campaign to do something about it.
So your real mission is providing people the information so that they know that this problem exists. No?
My mission is to free people.
Okay. Well, we're on the same mission.
You keep restating it in a way that isn't the same.
Okay. Your mission is to free.
The goal is for people to be free. Ideally, everyone. If I only get part way there, well, that's partial success. It's better than giving up. It's better than not trying. But no, I won't say if someone knows about free software and says, I don't care whether I'm free or not. I love this convenience. Well, that's failure, but what can I do?
Right. Because
you can't win them all.
Otherwise, you'd be infringing their freedoms, right? Their right to maybe some people are okay with giving up their privacy and their data to use a more convenient.
Those are two different questions, please. You just jump from one topic to another. I'm careful and precise when I describe these philosophical questions.
Okay.
And snooping on users is not the same thing as using non-free software. They're related because nowadays non-free software generally snoops on users. But they're not the same. And in fact, there are online disservices that will snoop on users, which can be accessed without any non-free software. You could use a free browser to talk to it, and it doesn't send you JavaScript. So no non-free software is involved. But if you give data to that server, it will still snoop on, it will still mistreat you by saving that data, and it shouldn't have that data. So we do have to distinguish between these two issues, restricting you by stopping you from changing the software you're using, and snooping on you by means of a service or a disservice, as I call it.
Okay, understood. But somebody who decides to use a Google or a Facebook and is cognizant of the fact that they're going to be snooped on or that their data is going to be taken,
is this one person or two people?
Many people. Are you okay with that person making that choice?
No, it makes me very sad, but there's nothing I can do about it if a person's mind is made up.
Understood.
You'll notice I refuse to use plural pronouns to refer to single individuals. I dislike the confusion that introduces into English. And I've collected some examples of sentences which are some work to figure out. Because the sentence says they or them, and there are two possible antecedents, one being singular and one being plural. Well, the way I say things, I use the singular pronouns person, per, and pers. And this way, you can tell it's a singular antecedent. So I can respect gender neutrality and non-binary gender in a way that doesn't forfeit grammatical agreement and therefore keeps English clear.
Understood. I'm not on that level. I want to get into, because I've heard some of your other interviews. So let's talk more about data privacy. Let's talk about cash. I heard you talking about the fact that you don't even use a credit card, or unless you're required to in some instance.
Well, the only case where I use a credit card is for flights.
For flights, because you can't use cash for flights.
Well, you can't be anonymous on a flight. This is why I don't talk about data privacy. That opposing the issue in those terms goes in a direction that's not the one I want to go in when I think about what's going on. What I want is anonymity.
Okay.
Privacy, well, it's less clear. A lot of people formulate the issue as data protection. And that's absolutely clearly wrong, because that means let them collect the data and then try to regulate what they're going to do with it. But that's hopeless. I mean, we already know that the FBI or some equivalent can take all that data, the whole database, whatever it wants to. So whatever regulations they're putting on have a gaping hole, and I'm not satisfied with them. I demand that the data not be collected. The only data that will not be abused are the data that are not collected. Once the database is collected, it will be misused.
I totally agree with that. So now we're going right where I want to go. So now the cypherpunk viewpoint of that is, let's create technology that doesn't allow that collection to happen in the first place.
Well, we can do that for some kinds of uses, but keep in mind that whatever technology we create, that won't prevent the face recognition camera in the street from recognizing us, right? There are systems that we own and that we intentionally use, and there, if we have control over them, we can stop them from giving away data about us. There are systems we use but we don't own. For instance, the ISP, the phone company connection, the phone network for wireless, in all these different systems that we talk to, or at least most of us talk to most of them. And those systems, though, don't belong to us. So we don't get to decide how they're designed. We don't get to decide how they will treat us. So if we want to stop them from mistreating us, we can't do it by the simple free software route. We can only do that by regulation, by law.
Okay.
And then there are the other systems, or can be the other systems, that exist only to surveil us. And likewise, to stop them from doing dangerous, excessive surveillance, only law can do it. Now, we developed over centuries a protection against surveillance, and that is the search warrant. The requirement to justify specific cases of investigating specific people, not to allow government agencies to go fishing through everyone's lives all the time. That's too dangerous. But that is what governments are allowing the internet to turn into. And China shows what that implies.
And how about this cypherpunk belief? in addition to regulation and supporting, the Fourth Amendment, but then just building technology that essentially is resistant to collecting data. Obviously, it's not going to solve all problems. Like you said, it's not going to prevent cameras from recording us, but it could solve some problems.
That's right.
Are you an advocate of those technologies?
Oh, yes, in general, yes. For instance, I use Tor for my browsing, and I encrypt emails when I care about that. I don't want, I mean, I don't want to have to get everybody's public key. It would be too much trouble. So I do it when it's important to me.
Now, how about with regards to to communication and to money? So
Well,
if we could talk
two
about
different things. Communication, yes, I'm in favor of it. We have a program called GNU Jammy,
Mhm.
which does encrypted communication between users, and it also avoids having a server. There's no central server for it. However, when it comes to payments, I have a different goal in regard to privacy.
yeah, this is
I
where we
think
start to
that the
diverge.
individual, right, that's true. I think the individuals deserve anonymity in their purchases. More generally, purchasers deserve anonymity. But the stores they buy from must not be allowed to hide their sales. They must not be allowed to hide their revenue so that it all gets taxed. So this
Understood.
is what GNU Taler is designed for. If
So then,
GNU
are you actually then? I'll let you get to that too. So then, are you actually opposed to cash? Because
No,
cash.
I'm in favor of cash, but it's not easy to do transactions of millions of dollars with cash. It's a big pain in the neck. You can do them with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's not truly anonymous, of course, which is one of its drawbacks, but it is used for giant transactions. And if the parties in the transaction are not identified, then that can be part of the global enormous practice of dodging taxes, which starves governments of the funds they need in order to do what the people need and transfers that money to the rich. And that's terribly harmful. So that's why GNU Taler is designed so that the seller is identified. The seller gets a transaction record, but in order to turn that into money, the seller has to go to the mint, to the bank, whatever you call it, and say, here I am, here's my ID, and I got this transaction, please turn it into money for me.
Is it a distributed system? Is it blockchain based? Is it
There's no blockchain. It uses encryption using David Chaum's blind signatures.
okay?
So
Like
there's no blockchain and there's no proof of work and there's no enormous waste of energy. Another
and
advantage.
and there's ultimately a server though that's
Yes, there is.
tracking these transactions.
There's one, I don't know how many servers there would be, but there's one service in logical terms that you would buy your Talers from. Well, there can be more than one system of Taler tokens. There can be separate systems with separate servers, but each kind of Taler token, for instance, suppose the European Union approves a system of Taler tokens, there would be one agency which would issue them.
So there would need to be a trusted agency that would
Yes,
run,
it would be connected with your bank, and and you'd be able to tell your bank, buy me some Taler tokens. That, by the way, is already being tested.
Now I have to swing back because you told me your real mission is freedom for everyone, and here we have this somewhat magical technology that's been
It's
invented.
not magical. It's free software. You can read the documents that
No,
it's
no, no. I'm
stored.
referring
You can read the source code.
to Bitcoin and Monero,
Oh,
which essentially is allowing people, giving people the liberty to essentially use money that's not controlled by any state entity, that's not controlled by any corporation. And with Monero going even further, allowing them to completely transact with pretty much complete privacy and anonymity, giving
well,
them the
I
liberty
should point that it's not magic. It's not magic. The source code is published. It is free software. So if you really want to know how it works, no one is stopping you from reading how it works. And of course, there are also descriptions of how it works. It's complicated.
Sure.
Now, I once read some of the description of how Bitcoin works. I didn't remember it, and I haven't gone back to look again because I have no reason to spend my time doing that. It's not something I'm going to use. That knowledge is not something I'm going to use in anything I do. So, but that's okay. I don't think it's a bad thing that there is free software I use, which I haven't read the source code of. The point is the user community controls that software.
Yes.
How do we stop it from being malware? The answer is various users read parts of it from time to time, and so they have a chance of spotting any malware and removing it. Whereas with non-free software, you can't read the source code, and even if you knew there was malware in it, you couldn't remove it, which is why non-free software generally is full of malware.
But why aren't you out there promoting Bitcoin and Monero if they
Because,
align?
as I said, they're not the things I want to use, and there are a number of reasons. One thing about Bitcoin is it's a currency and its value fluctuates. And I don't like that. I don't want to speculate in currency. That's not in accord with my temperament. There are people who do currency speculation. I suppose that I would lose a lot of money if I tried it. It's not the kind of thing I'm good at. So I don't want to speculate. I don't want to have my money in volatile currencies.
Are you okay with other people using it and attributing value?
I'm not against other people's doing currency speculation, if that's what you mean. I'm not against people's using Bitcoin, except partially because of one thing, namely how much energy it uses up. Aside from that, I don't think it's doing terrible harm, although I guess it could, if it became a big engine of diverting profits so that they can't be traced, I would consider that rather harmful. Whether Bitcoin is actually used much for that, I don't know.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is, it's not good at that at all, right? So it's a completely transparent ledger where every transaction can be tracked and traced.
Well, actually, people are apparently using Bitcoin on non-physical internet sites to buy various kinds of criminal things, even perhaps murders.
Sure, and a lot of them are getting caught for it, and eventually will, because now it's that those transactions are forever saved, and doing some police work, you could easily connect individuals with transactions.
So on the one hand, if I buy a product from an online store, I don't want there to be stuff that you could figure out that would enable you by doing police work to figure out it was me. I want it to be entirely equivalent to cash for me.
That's
Monero. The case with Toller.
Right. So that's Monero. But the gripe against Monero is taxes. Is that people may be
right? It's that it's anonymous for the payee.
Right. So, but aren't you okay with people just, opting in to pay their taxes? I mean, isn't that the
No, of
ideal
course
scenario?
not. Absolutely not.
So,
We need to make rich people pay taxes so that they contribute to giving everyone a decent life. That's the
I'm sorry,
responsibility of everyone.
opting in the wrong word, but trusting that they'll follow the rules and that they will pay, not so much
Not
of the government.
necessarily. I do believe that it's important to audit rich people's tax returns frequently. Of
Hmm.
course, the
Auditing
U.S.
fine.
government has been plutocratist
So,
for a
but would
long
you be
time, and so one thing you'll find out if you investigate is that the IRS audits a lot of poor people to
yes.
see whether they're cheating any way on their inadequate welfare benefits and tax benefits, but it doesn't audit the billionaires very much, so they get away with almost anything.
People need to pay their taxes? Audits, sure. But
Well, the point is,
are you
we don't want
suggesting there should be a world where essentially the state is automatically taxing people and taking their money
I don't know.
as opposed to
That's a
people
different question.
paying the taxes that are owed? That's what I
That's
meant.
a different question, and I haven't thought about that one. But the point is, it is different. Here I'm talking about whether the rich people that hide their income from the state, and then, of course, they don't report it in their tax returns. I
Mm-hmm.
saw an estimate recently, it might have been from the UN, that 10% of global wealth has been hidden in this way. It's owned by, quote, offshore, unquote, companies. Of course, offshore just means not in the country where the income is supposed to be recorded and taxed.
Mm.
So, in various ways, that money gets, or that income gets referred to some other country where maybe there is no income tax, or maybe it then goes to some other place and then it gets invested, but the profits go to some company whose owners are secret. Maybe it's incorporated in Nevis or one of those other places that does that. There are various kinds of tax havens, and the U.S. for certain purposes is a tax haven. Uh, I think Delaware for some purposes is a tax haven. The UK for some purposes is a tax haven. Belgium, Luxembourg, Ireland are tax havens for some purposes. And then there are the various uh, sort of obscure countries, for instance, Nevis, which basically exist to be tax havens.
Now, you mentioned your belief in support of the Fourth Amendment, so against illegal searches and seizures from the government. So why wouldn't you then apply that to money as well, right? So if everybody's
I don't know what that would mean.
So if everybody's using Monero, let's imagine a scenario where everybody's using Monero, and they're using it to transact on a daily basis. And then they're paying their taxes because the government's expecting them to pay their taxes.
Well, they may or may not be paying their taxes.
Well, they're
right?
being just like they're now being asked to pay their taxes in this scenario.
Right.
They're also
the
being
point
asked.
Is, I believe that we need to enforce payment of taxes by auditing, especially rich people, because they
right. So in this Monero,
taxes.
And I apologize for cutting you off. I just want to finish this scenario. In this scenario, I mean, with Monero, there's this thing called view keys, right? So let's say
I don't know what those are. I don't know the details of Monero.
Well, a view key is you can essentially provide someone the ability to see your wallet and your transactions without giving up your private key. So in a scenario where they see Doug Tuman and the government becomes curious as to whether or not I'm properly paying my taxes, they can come and audit me, and I can provide view keys.
I see.
Is that a scenario you're then okay with?
Well, I don't know, but it does sound like an alteration for the better. I don't know enough to evaluate this fully,
Mm.
what it would imply morally. Like, could you make another key or another wallet and use that, a secret wallet that you'd never tell the tax authorities you have? You know, would that be a way to evade it? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, the answer may be known, just not to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I heard you talk about what you saw as being essentially the most important or sensitive data. So, right, like where you are, who you meet, and what those people are saying when they meet.
Yeah.
How about how you spend your money and how you transact? Would you include those as being equally important?
Almost, because a lot of things that you do don't involve spending money but are very sensitive. In fact, the things that don't involve spending money may be the most sensitive. Uh, you can go well, however, spending money for transport, that's extremely sensitive because that's part of where you go. So, transportation systems that identify their users uh, are basically uh, platforms for repression. And likewise, if talking with somebody involves spending some money, and if spending money identifies you, that is repression right there. And in general, I think you should be able to buy things without identifying yourself.
Well, yeah. Also, isn't it potentially even a more valuable form of speech? So, you know,
No,
we could be saying things here, right? But then we could be spending our money differently as to what we're saying. You know that expression, put your money where your mouth is,
I
right?
don't
So,
agree with the idea that money is speech. I think that that is a terrible decision uh, made by a plutocratist Supreme Court, and it's a disaster. So
so you
no,
don't think
money
people
is
should
not
have the
speech.
freedom to
Well, yes,
spend
yes,
their money
yes,
the way they
yes,
want
yes,
to?
more or less, yes, but not by saying that the spending is speaking, but just because it's a part of your life, and if they know every time you spend money, they know almost everything about you, and
Well,
that's unacceptable.
well,
We need
ultimately,
anonymous money to spend.
mm-hmm. I mean, the protections we're talking about, you know, the Fourth Amendment, and then let's say like the First Amendment, really what they're protecting, or at least my understanding of the Federalist Papers and the, you know, what this country was founded upon, is protecting political speech and political activities and protecting the free flow of information and thought so that tyrannies can never persist in this country. By allowing the free flow of information and thought and political opinion, a tyranny can never take root or take hold, right? So
Well,
by
that's where it
allowing people
starts,
to
but
speak freely and assemble and practice their own politics, they can ensure that they'll always have an opinion, even if that opinion happens to be a minority one. And then
well,
so
yes,
spending
but
money, I just want to finish the point. So I do you think spending money is similar to that? So let's say a
no,
scenario where you
it's
had
just a part of your life.
well, let's say a
But the
scenario
point
where you
is,
had a minority
let me
I just
say,
want to
okay,
finish the
can
point.
I answer?
I
Can
just
I
want to finish
answer?
the point. I know it's a long point, but a point, you know, where you had a minority political party, right? And then you had people that wanted to support that political party, and now they could support it by sending money to this group because they support this idea, giving it the ability to support itself. Isn't that almost as important as speech at that point? Being able to provide.
Yes and no, but please let me tell you what I do think instead of trying to make me start from a different thing, which is not what I think.
Sure.
The reason why it's important in general to be able to spend money and buy things anonymously is that if the state knew what you buy, everything that you buy, it could repress you. So, for the sake of having a free life in general, you must be allowed to buy things anonymously.
Right.
Now, in terms of contributions to political activity, I think that the contributions that are lawful, people should be able to make anonymously. But stopping billionaires from making giant contributions is also crucial for democracy, at least as things are now. Now, I like the idea of public campaign financing, where the people who donate small amounts attract much bigger matching amounts from the state,
Mm-hmm.
and that campaigns will be mainly funded this way. And if this is strong enough, and if the richest people are not too rich, then maybe this makes it futile for rich people to donate, especially if such donations are matched for the opponents. So a billionaire gives 5 million to that candidate, and the opposing candidates get their own 5 million to match it. Then it becomes futile to give that 5 million. Maybe that makes the problem go away. But we have a system now where wealth is so unequal, so unevenly distributed, that maybe the billionaire could break the bank of the public campaign funding system. So, we need to get rid of those giant fortunes. We need to put on a wealth tax, and we need to change the systems that give them so much money so that they don't get so much money anymore. We're very far away from democracy in this country, and by what I mean by that is, wow, are they cheering us?
Or booing, I don't know which one.
Anyway, someone did a study looking at the outcomes of political decisions and correlating them with public opinion, and found that since the mid-90s, there is no correlation in the US. The democratic input of public opinion is zero. The decisions are influenced by A, special interests, the businesses that really care about that particular issue, and B, the very rich.
Okay.
So if we want democracy, we've got to get rid of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what I think about all issues that affect that affect how much the rich can influence politics. That's how I think about them. On the one hand, if I want to give $50 to some political cause, I think it would be good if I could do that anonymously. But if I wanted to give $1 million, I think I shouldn't be able to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling with, understanding your worldview, and you're weighing your support for free software and software that doesn't take people's private data.
But not just that, but basically software that is controlled by the users. And
right.
Free software is controlled by the users both individually and collectively.
Right, and ultimately that your passion for that stems for a very strong belief in liberty, is my understanding.
Yes, but liberty doesn't mean that a billionaire has the liberty to buy elections.
Understood.
Buy laws that suit per interests.
But liberty should mean that I have the liberty to spend my money as I wish and to transact little digits around.
No,
through a distributed ledger without
no.
being stopped or spied on.
I've already the latter part okay, but no, you shouldn't be allowed to spend your money any way you wish. The more money you're talking about spending, the more it needs to be put in check so that you don't get too much power to the point that you're dangerous for democracy and dangerous for other people's freedom. We see billionaires pushing workers into peonage.
So
We can't allow people to get that rich, and we can't allow the ones who are not quite that rich, but nonetheless rich, to do whatever they like with their money.
so
Maybe you
in a
should,
world in a
maybe
world
you don't have too much money. Maybe then you should be able to do what you like. But the point is that rich people must not be able to do whatever they like with their money, because you see
right, but
what they do.
rich people already have this advantage over people,
We need to take it away from them.
or give everybody else essentially a weapon that can compete.
But it can't compete.
Provide them the same liberty that rich people already have.
That wouldn't help. You see, they can use it to do big things, and you could only use it to do small things. So it's okay if you have it. I'm not against your having it, because the little things you can do don't threaten everybody's freedom and don't threaten to take away everybody else's share of society's wealth. But when billionaires can do that, that's exactly what they do. We have had billionaires buying laws in this country for decades, and those laws advantage the rich and they may kill the poor.
Yeah, and that's a problem, and that's
So
a problem.
how are we going to have democracy?
But I'm sure you would agree that the internet overall has I would think you would say has improved society, right?
It's hard for me to be sure. When I look at the effects of Facebook and Twitter and even YouTube, I'm not sure whether they add up to good or bad.
Even the weighing it against
Facebook, I'm sure shouldn't exist.
But there's all the great, right? All the liberty it's provided to people, access to information, for example.
Yes, that's good, but we also see bad things happening. Although I think the worst things come from the algorithms that promote certain people's statements because they make people upset and cause lots of, quote, engagement, unquote. I think if we got rid of those algorithms, that the internet might start being safer for democracy. But we see organized disinformation campaigns, and the worst one is the extreme right-wing disinformation campaign, which was championed by the Wrecker while he was president.
Okay.
And this is terribly dangerous. We haven't gotten rid of that horrible effect. We've only sort of half got rid of it. We can't fix what's wrong with this country now. And these things that are wrong are getting worse and worse.
How about we saw the deplatforming of the president and others, and essentially censorship that was impeded on them. How about if we just look at Monero as being a censorship-resistant communication protocol?
Okay, I don't wish to ignore the fact that it's a protocol for payments. And
it's really just a distributed ledger, and
I don't know.
Then people have
attributed
attributed
value. Different from a communication. Now,
wait, what's
I am not saying that I don't know enough about Monero to judge it. I thought I knew more than I actually do know. You told me something I didn't know, and I don't know what its consequences and implications are. So I can't have a judgment now about Monero. What I'll say is that for small amounts, it's probably harmless and good.
But
If it gets to big amounts,
right? How do you allow it to be used for small amounts and not large
I
amounts?
don't know. I don't know. In the case of Monero, there may not be a way, or maybe there is. I don't know. You need a technical expert on Monero to see if there is a way to do that. It might be impossible because one person could have any number of wallets, and if with each wallet you could pay $1,000, well, with $1,000 wallets you could pay $1 million. Maybe there is no way to limit that, or maybe there is. I don't know. With Thaler, the plan is that you wouldn't be able to get an unlimited number of Thalers. There'd be a certain amount you could get per week, and would be fine for your purchases. Maybe you could get 1,000 per week. There are not very many purchases that go beyond that.
But I mean, you said you only use cash, or you try to for most things.
Well, there are, for purchasing things, I only use cash.
Right, but there are people that have a lot of cash, millions of dollars worth of cash.
Yeah, but it's indeed, once in a while they can make a payment of $1 million with cash, but $1 million of cash takes up bulk. In any case, I never make purchases that big. Although, basically, the biggest purchases I've made have been things for which my name had to be on them. So anonymity was pointless, and no, I didn't use cash. It's the same as with airline tickets.
Right. So doesn't that
credit card because anonymity is, that might be.
That solve problems?
Maybe.
If I wanted to go buy a house with Monero, I mean, whether I'm paying with Monero or going to the bank.
That's right.
Right.
I bought an apartment, and so I paid by check.
So that maybe so maybe Monero could work, right?
Maybe. As I said, I don't know enough about it to know whether it could be modified to be perfectly good from my point of view. I could only tell you the concerns I have, the problems that I worry about, and one of them is to make sure that income gets taxed and not hidden, because that problem is real and it's enormous. And reportedly, there are poor countries whose governments can't afford to provide schools for everyone and other basic things like that because they don't get taxes. The money gets sent out of the country, and it has no way of ever getting it back. So this is not just a theoretical problem. It's a horrible, grueling problem.
What's your ideal vision for the world in terms of computing and software?
Oh, okay. That makes it a little easier. My vision for the world, I don't think in terms of trying to come up with the ideal way the world should be, because that doesn't help me decide what to do about the real issues of today. For that, all I need to know is what would make things better in regard to those issues. I don't need to have an ultimate perfection in mind. For computing, it's a bit easier. Basically, people should use free software, and only free software, so that they're not being controlled and mistreated by software developers. And free software is the only way to avoid that. And the services that people use should be rather minimal and simple, so that you could develop another one. so that you don't become trapped in one particular service. And they should have interfaces that are all documented so that you can write your own software to talk to those services, and you know what data they are getting about you. And there's no way for them to collect any data secretly. The whole interaction is documented, so the only data those services get is what you can see in the protocols they're going to get. And they shouldn't ever send you software to run on your machine. So no JavaScript.
When I hear you say these things, I agree with you, but I feel like, from my point of view, I agree with what you're saying, but you could replace the word free software essentially with Monero. So people should use Monero so that they
wait
be controlled by governments and corporations, and so that they can control their own data and they
maintain. You just did an invalid logical manipulation. You'll notice that I didn't say anything about which software people should use, only that it should be free. I didn't say, well, then people should use Emacs because Emacs is free software. Well, I said whatever software you use, it should be free software. If you want it to be Emacs, well, okay. If you want it to be Monero, then within certain limits, okay. I'm worried about what rich people would do with Monero. I'm worried about their tax evasion. I'm worried about their secret political spending. Maybe these have solutions within Monero. I don't know. You've shown me I don't know everything I would need to know about Monero to know to determine whether those problems have solutions in it. I hope they do. But the point I made is simply that you shouldn't use any non-free software because that will be designed to mistreat you. Monero is free software. So on that issue, it's good.
We could check that box. Would you consider becoming more involved in cryptocurrency and in particular Monero?
I don't have time to be. I don't do software development anymore. I haven't for almost 20 years because I was involuntarily self-promoted into management. I am trying to lead people to fight for their freedom. And while there might be programs I could develop if it's still within my power to do so, I am about to be 68 years old. But the thing is, I don't have time available to spend that way. I don't have time available to become an expert on Monero or Bitcoin or Thaler or any other such complicated program. I leave it to other people.
Okay. Fair enough.
Too bad. But on the other hand, it's partly too bad. It's partly a consequence of success.
Yes. Yeah. Your time is valuable, and you've certainly been a great success in what you've concentrated on in your life.
I don't know if it's valuable, but it's certainly limited.
I'd say it's both. And I appreciate you giving your time to me and coming on this show. Thank you so much.
Happy hacking.
All right. That was a great conversation, sir. And I hope to be in touch. Maybe we can get you to come on again sometime.
Certainly.
All right.
When enough has happened so that it would be different.
Got it.
Happy hacking. Bye.
Happy hacking. Thank you, Richard.
Free software is the first battle in the liberation of cyberspace. Who controls your computer? Is it you? Or is it some big company that's really controlling it? Well, what is a computer? A computer is a universal machine. It will do any computation you want it to because you give it a program that says what the computation is that you want. So the computer only knows how to get out an instruction and do it, and get out another instruction and do it. The program has the instructions. It says what to do. So by writing the right program, you can make it do anything. Well, almost anything. So who gives the instructions to your computer? You might think it's obeying your instructions when really it's obeying somebody else first, and you, only as much as that company wants it to, will let it listen to you. With software, there are two possibilities. Either the users control the program or the program controls the users. It's inevitably one or the other. So in order for the users to control the program, they need the 4 essential freedoms. And that's the definition of free software. Free software respects the user's freedom and community. Now, we often call it libre, using the French or Spanish word, pronounce it as you like. The point is, that's what we mean. We don't mean it's gratis. We're not talking about price. We're concerned with your freedom. And we sometimes say free/libre to show that. So freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish for whatever purpose. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code of the program and change it so it does the computing you want it to do. But what is the source code? Well, every program typically will have 2 forms. There's the form that you can read and you can understand if you know the programming language. That's the source. That's what programmers write and change. Then there's the executable, which is a bunch of numbers which even a programmer can't figure out. If all you get is the executable, it's a horrible pain in the neck to figure out what it does, and even harder to change it. So to give you the real possibility to study and change it, they've got to give you the source code. That's a requirement. Well, with those 2 freedoms, each user separately can make a copy and start changing it and make it do what she wants. That's individual control. But what if you're not a programmer? You look at the source code and you don't understand it. Individual control isn't enough. We also need collective control, which means any group of users are free to work together to adapt the program to what they want. Of course, in the group, some of them are programmers. They're the ones who actually write the changes, but they're doing it as part of the group for what the group wants. Of course, the group doesn't have to be everybody. So others can use it some other way. They're all free to do that. So collective control requires 2 more essential freedoms. Freedom 2 is the freedom to redistribute exact copies, to make the copies and then give them away or sell them when you wish. And freedom 3 is similar, but it's for your modified versions. You're free to make copies and then give them or sell them when you wish. So if you do have these freedoms, then it's free software. The users control the program. But if any of those freedoms is missing, then the users don't control the program. Instead, the program controls the users, and the developer controls the program. So that means this program is an instrument of unjust power for its developer over the users. That means the users don't have freedom. That's non-free proprietary software, which we got to get rid of. Well, when you've got proprietary software, what happens? Sometimes the program snoops on the user. Sometimes it tracks the user. Sometimes it restricts the user and stops users from doing what they want to do. You can see that the blue ray is your enemy. Sometimes the software remotely deletes books, as Amazon did with 1984. Sometimes the developer compels users to install a harmful upgrade by threatening to take away other functionality if it's not installed, as Sony did. And sometimes they can even forcibly change the software at a distance, as Microsoft can with Windows through the universal backdoor. So sometimes they even sabotage users, as Microsoft does when it tells the NSA about bugs in Windows so it can use them to attack people's computers. Well, what you get is basically, with proprietary software, the owner has power over the users and takes advantage of this power, putting in those various malicious functionalities to hurt the users. Of course, they don't do this because they're sadists. They're doing it just for money, for greed. They have various ways that they can profit from having this power over users, which does not make it even the tiniest bit less evil. But they have no shame about it. They have conferences where they talk about the latest ways they can take advantage of users through the power they have. Basically, proprietary software, which is now for almost all the users of proprietary software, they're using proprietary malware. It's software for suckers. So how do you stop being the victim? Formerly, you had to stop using computers, but not anymore. Now you can come join us in the free world that we've built. In 1983, I announced I would develop a completely free software operating system called GNU. In 1992, we had it almost finished, but one piece was missing, the kernel. Linus Torvalds in that year freed his kernel Linux, which filled the last gap and gave us the first complete system you could run on a PC, GNU plus Linux. So, unfortunately, having freedom at one point doesn't guarantee you'll keep it. There are over 1,000 different variants of GNU/Linux. They're called distributions. A few of them are entirely free software. Most of them have non-free software added because they're maintained by people who aren't concerned about freedom. They'd rather add convenience at the cost of freedom. So you have to check which is a free distro. To keep your freedom sometimes requires a sacrifice, sometimes a big sacrifice, as at Lexington. Sometimes, but in our campaign, they tend to be little sacrifices. Anybody with a little bit of maturity can make these sacrifices. For instance, you want applications, but some of them are non-free. If you want freedom, you got to do without them. So there may be some inconveniences you have to suffer for your freedom's sake. Then many websites send non-free programs written in JavaScript to the user's browser. If you don't want to run non-free programs, you should install Libre.js, which keeps out non-free JavaScript. And sometimes servers will offer to do your computing. They say, send us all your data, obviously for suckers. Then the server does the computing and sends you back the results. But you're not supposed to think about what's happening because it's a cloud and you don't see what's going on. Well, you should look. It's service as a software substitute, and it takes away control of your computing. So a large fraction of the world's web servers are running GNU/Linux and other free software. But I think the most important computers to put freedom in are your computers, not companies' web servers. They deserve freedom also. But above all, it's people that deserve freedom. So we need to advance. And to do that, we have to cross obstacles. One of them is there are big companies that make a lot of money by having control over users, and they don't want to let us advance. We have to overcome their opposition. Another is that the mainstream media don't talk about free software. They have a term that they use to bury these ethical issues. They say open source instead. Now, it talks about more or less the same programs, but with different ideas, where free software activists say, this is a matter of right and wrong. Users deserve freedom. We demand freedom. The people who say open source, they don't want to say that. So instead they say, let the users change the software and redistribute it, and they'll make the code better. They'll fix some bugs. It may be true, but it's a less important issue. If we want to keep our freedom, we've got to talk about freedom. So say free software, and you're helping us every time. Another obstacle is that lots of schools teach non-free software, which is basically like teaching the kids to smoke tobacco. It's implanting dependence, which is the opposite of what schools should do. A school should prepare citizens to live in a strong, capable, independent, cooperating, and free society, which means teaching free software in the school. But there's another reason to do that for education. Some kids want to become programmers. They're curious. They want to know how the programs work. Well, the one who's studying a free software can understand it. The one who's studying a non-free program can't learn anything because the knowledge in the non-free program is withheld, denied to the students. So to uphold the spirit of education, the school should make sure its programs are free. But there's an even more important reason. Schools should teach the spirit of goodwill, the habit of helping other people. So the class should say, if you bring a program to class, just as if you bring cookies to class, you've got to share it with everyone else. Can't keep it to yourself. You got to share the source code so other people can learn. So don't bring any proprietary software to this class. The school has to set a good example by following its own rule. It should bring only free software to class, except as a reverse engineering exercise. Another obstacle is there's hardware we don't know how to write free software for because they won't tell us how to use the hardware. That's shocking. They want to sell you the product and they won't tell you how to use it. They say, here's a non-free program you can use, run it and shut up. Don't bother us. Well, how do we find out how to run that hardware? With reverse engineering, you've got to study all those zeros and ones to figure out what they really do and write down how to use that hardware so someone else can write the free program to do it. It's hard work, but it can be done. If you want to make a big technical contribution, that's what you should do. Each new activity of life can bring with it new human rights that are necessary. And the human rights depend on each other. If you lose one, it becomes harder to maintain the others. So nowadays, computing is so important in society that the freedoms of free software are among the human rights that society must establish and protect. Thus, how to help? Well, you can write free software. You can organize groups to campaign and persuade schools and governments to move to free software. You can help other people when they have trouble using free software or help them install it. You can say free software and spread the philosophical ideas. Moving to free software is the first step in the liberation of cyberspace. But of course, we also use the internet. We need other freedoms there, like network neutrality and putting an end to surveillance of people in general.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode. We release new episodes every week. You can find